here, and welcome back to my channel for another step-by-step sewing tutorial. In this one, I'll be teaching you how to make a bell sleeve top, which is just so fun and playful. You can add these sleeves to so many different tops or dresses. I just did a basic bodice here, but I've also made it with a V-neck bodice, and you can add it to any of my skater dress tutorials as well. I really hope you enjoy this one, and if you do, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more, and let's get sewing! To make this top, I used about 1.5 yards of a 4-way stretch knit fabric, and it is important that your fabric stretches so you get that nice fitted bodice. And you'll also need a well-fitting shirt with sleeves to use as a template. To begin, find the curved seams where the sleeve and bodice are sewn together and fold one of your sleeves into the center of the shirt. Adjust it along that seam so you can see the curved shape of the armhole like so, and if needed, pin the fabric in place so it stays in that shape. Fold the other sleeve in and adjust it the same way, so now your shirt looks like a tank top. And finally, fold it in half down the center, and this is our easy bodice pattern. Fold a portion of your fabric over a little wider than the shirt, making sure it stretches the most in the direction the arrows are going so the bodice will stretch around you once it's done. Lay your shirt onto the fabric so the folds line up and pin it into place. Cut out the bodice by cutting a 1/2 inch larger than your shirt, following along the shape of the neckline, shoulder, armhole, side, and bottom edge. And that extra 1/2 inch adds the hem and seam allowance we need to make our new top. When you remove the shirt and unfold your fabric, you'll have a bodice piece cut out that looks like this. Then cut a second identical bodice piece, although I did lower the neckline of one of the pieces for the front of the top. Lay them together with the correct sides of the fabrics facing together and pin and sew along the shoulders and sides using a 1/2 inch seam allowance for all your seams. Since we're using stretch fabric, use a ballpoint needle and sew all your seams and hems with either a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch, either of which will allow the seams to stretch without breaking. And a tip for those of you who have trouble with your seams and hems looking wavy on stretch fabric, try an even feed walking foot. I finally tried one out recently on a tricky knit that kept looking wavy and it worked great. When you're done, try your bodice on to make sure it fits and make any adjustments if needed, then set it aside. Lay your shirt so the sleeve is straightened out where this top straight edge is the folded edge, and this curved seam where the sleeve and armhole are sewn together looks kind of like half of a bell shape. Lay a see-through piece of paper like tissue or tracing paper so its straight edge lines up with the sleeve's folded edge. Trace the sleeve shape by following along that curved armhole seam and continue along the inside edge of the sleeve, but stop tracing wherever you want the bell part of the sleeve to begin. I stopped tracing where the sleeve hit my elbow, so the rest of the sleeve will wind up being flared out. Draw a straight line back to the folded edge, and then I always like to mark where the folded edge was on my paper. Remove the sleeve and draw new lines to add seam allowance a 1/2 inch outside of your sleeve shape, then cut along those new lines to create your sleeve pattern, which should look something like this. Fold a portion of your fabric over, pin the pattern onto the fold, and cut around it. When you remove the pattern and unfold your fabric, you'll have a sleeve cut out that looks similar to this, then cut a second sleeve. Fold them in half with correct sides together and pin and sew along the diagonal edge. Then measure the distance around the bottom edge of the sleeve, including the seam allowance. I got 11 inches. We'll be cutting out a quarter circle shape for the bell part of the sleeve, and much like when we make a skater skirt, we have to do a couple of easy calculations to draw out the shape. First, divide the number you just measured, 11 inches for me, by 1.57. I got about 7 inches. Then subtract a 1/2 inch from your number to build in seam allowance for when we sew the bell to the sleeve. I got 6.5 inches total. Go to a corner of your fabric, making sure both edges are cut straight to form a right angle, and measure from that corner to make a mark at the number you just calculated, so my mark is at 6.5 inches. Swivel the tape measure down slightly and make another mark at that same number, then repeat that process of measuring and marking from the corner to create a quarter circle shape. Connect the marks with a line and then cut along the line. Decide how long you want the bell part to be. I wanted mine to be 11.5 inches, so it'd end at my wrist, and add 1 inch for hem and seam allowance, so I got 12.5 total. Begin measuring from the top of the curve and make a mark at your number, so mine is at 12.5 inches. Move the tape measure down the curve slightly and make another mark at that number, then continue measuring and marking down the curve to create another larger quarter circle shape. Again, connect it with a line and cut it out, and this will be the bell, so repeat to cut a second bell. Fold them in half with correct sides together and pin and sew along the straight edges. Turn one of your sleeves right side out and one of your bells inside out, and flip the bell over so the smaller curve is facing down. Slide the sleeve down into the bell and line up all the raw edges together. Match up the seams on both pieces and pin them together, always opening up and flattening out the seam allowances anytime you pin seams together. Then line up and pin the raw edges together more frequently around the rest of the sleeve and sew to join the pieces, so now you have a full bell sleeve made. Attach the other bell the same way. Go to the point at the top of the curve on each sleeve and use straight pins to mark this point on both pieces, which is where the sleeves will sit at your shoulders. To attach them to the bodice, turn the bodice inside out and the sleeve right side out. Grab the end of your sleeve and slide it in bell first through the armhole, lining up the raw edges of the fabrics together around the armhole. Match up the shoulder seam on the bodice to that point you marked with a pin on the sleeve and pin them together. Then match up and pin the armpit seams on both pieces as well. Pin the raw edges together more frequently around the rest of the armhole, and when you're finished pinning, sew to attach the sleeve. Then repeat to attach the other sleeve. To hem the neckline, turn the bodice inside out and fold the raw edge of fabric over about 1/4 inch once, then fold it over again another 1/4 inch and pin it into place. Double fold the next section 1/4 inch at a time and pin it down, and continue this process, smoothing out the fabric with your finger as you go to help it lay flat around the curves. When you get to the shoulder seams, open up and flatten out the seam allowance before folding it, then flip the top over and continue around the other side of the neckline. Smoothing out the fabric as you go and pinning frequently will help the hem lay neatly around the curved edges. When it's completely pinned, sew around the neckline to secure the hem, and I decided to use a decorative stretch stitch for my hems to add a nice detail. And for some reason, my machine started acting up really bad right at this point, and I haven't been able to fix it yet, so I borrowed my mom's machine and finished sewing on it, so thank you, Mom! And I was really happy with how the decorative stitch looked on this fabric. Hem the bottom of your bell sleeve the exact same way by double folding the fabric 1/4 inch at a time, pinning, and sewing to secure the hems. And finally, repeat that same process to hem the bottom edge of your bodice, and now your top is complete. And you could totally combine these sleeves with any of my other stretch fabric projects for a fun flair. Happy sewing, y'all! I was not recording. Make sure I hit the record button this time. We need different other